The rain had just stopped. Cold light poured through the glass walls of the Hale mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floor. A 14-year-old girl stood trembling in a maid's uniform, her hand gripping that of an 8-year-old boy. Her name was Emma Turner. The boy beside her was Noah. In front of them stood Mr. Hale, CEO of a financial empire, a man known for his ice-cold composure. But now his face had gone pale, colorless, his breathing shallow. Emma's voice cut through the silence. "Sir, this boy lived with me in the orphanage." The folder in his hand slipped. Papers scattered across the polished stone. No one moved. The assistant at the door froze mid-step. The housekeeper's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The light reflected off the marble beneath their feet. Everyone stared at each other, confused, trying to understand why those simple words had struck the wealthiest man in the city silent. He took one step back. His eyes locked onto the child. His lips parted, but nothing came. Before you know what truly happened, take a guess. Was this girl doing something wrong or something right? Because sometimes the truth doesn't live in the words we speak. It lives in the heart of the one brave enough to speak them. Emma Turner was 14 years old. She lived with her mother Martha in a small room at the back of the Hale mansion. The room was old, paint peeled from the walls. The ceiling had water stains shaped like continents. But there was always laughter there. Always warmth. Martha worked as the head housekeeper for Mr. Hale, a man whose name commanded respect in every boardroom in the city. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. But mostly he was known for being alone. 8 years ago, his wife died in a car accident. On that same night, his 3-year-old son vanished. The authorities searched for months. They found nothing. No body. No trace. Just absence. Mr. Hale never remarried. Never smiled. He lived in that enormous mansion like a ghost haunting his own life. Emma had been taught early on, don't ask questions. Don't look Mr. Hale in the eye for too long. Don't get in the way. She and her mother existed in the margins of his world, invisible unless needed. Every morning Emma woke at 5:30 to help her mother prepare breakfast. She folded linens, polished silver, dusted the endless rows of books no one ever read. In the afternoons she studied at the small table in their room, her textbooks secondhand, her dreams too big for the space she occupied. Then one morning, everything changed. A black car pulled up to the front entrance. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. A small boy emerged clutching a worn backpack. He was 8 years old, thin with eyes that had seen too much. His name was Noah. He had been brought by the Hale Foundation, a charitable fund Mr. Hale had established years ago to support orphan children. Noah was one of dozens the foundation sponsored each year. But he was the first to ever be brought directly to the mansion. Emma was wiping down the hallway mirror when she saw him. She stopped. Her breath caught. She knew that face. Years ago, before Martha found work at the mansion, Emma had lived at St. Mary's Orphanage. It was a cold place, crowded and underfunded. But the children there took care of each other. And Emma had taken care of Noah. Back then, he was only 5. He didn't speak much. He had nightmares. A small scar on his wrist that he never explained. Emma used to sit beside his bed on the nights he couldn't sleep, humming softly until his breathing steadied. Now, here he was, taller, older, but still carrying that same quiet fear in his eyes. She wanted to run to him, to hug him. But she stayed where she was, cloth in hand, watching from a distance. Later that evening, after the house had gone quiet, Emma found Noah sitting alone in the hallway outside the guest room. His knees were pulled up to his chest. She sat down beside him. "Do you remember me?" she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You sang to me," he said softly, "when I was scared." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and took his hand. "I'm still here," she said. "You're safe now." Noah leaned his head against her shoulder. For the first time in years, Emma felt like she had a purpose again. That night she told her mother everything. Martha listened in silence, her hands folded in her lap. When Emma finished, Martha shook her head slowly. "Don't say anything to Mr. Hale," she warned. Rich people don't like hearing about the lives of poor people. It makes them uncomfortable. We stay quiet. We stay safe. Emma didn't argue, but something inside her had shifted. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Mr. Hale stood alone by the window of his office. The city lights stretched out before him like stars fallen to earth. He signed documents without reading them, answered emails without feeling. His face was blank, empty. He had built an empire, but he had lost everything that mattered. Outside in the garden below, Emma was teaching Noah how to tie his shoes properly. He kept getting the loops wrong, and they both laughed until they couldn't breathe. Mr. Hale glanced down at them, just for a second. Then he turned away. One night, a week later, Emma found Noah standing by the window in the hallway, staring out at the dark sky. "Emma," he said quietly, "do you think my real parents are still alive?" She didn't know what to say. She walked over and took his hand in hers. In her eyes, a deep sadness flickered. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Noah nodded. He didn't cry. He just held her hand a little tighter. And somewhere in the distance the moon hung low and pale, casting its light over a house full of secrets. The mansion was preparing for its biggest event of the year, the annual gala for the Hale Foundation. A night to celebrate the charity work that helped hundreds of orphan children across the country. White roses filled every corner. Crystal chandeliers were polished until they blazed like trapped suns. Caterers moved through the kitchen in perfect rhythm. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh champagne. Emma and her mother worked from dawn until dusk. They set tables, arranged flowers, pressed linens. Noah helped where he could, carrying small vases, folding napkins, staying out of the way. By evening, the guests began to arrive. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that shimmered like liquid gold. They moved through the grand hall with glasses in hand, voices low and polished laughter measured and elegant. Mr. Hale stood near the center of it all, shaking hands, offering that rare, practiced smile. He looked every bit the successful philanthropist, composed, untouchable, in control. But Emma knew better. She had seen him late at night, standing alone in his office, staring at nothing. As the evening went on, Noah was asked to help serve water to the guests. He was nervous. His hands shook as he carried the silver tray. Emma watched him from across the room, her heart tight with worry. Then it happened. Noah stumbled. The tray tilted. A crystal glass slipped from his grip and shattered against the marble floor. The sound cut through the conversation like a gunshot. Everyone turned. Noah froze. His face went pale. Shards of glass glittered at his feet like broken stars. He bent down quickly, trying to pick up the pieces with his bare hands. That's when Emma saw it. A jagged piece of glass sliced across his wrist, right over the old scar. Blood welled up dark and red. Across the room, Mr. Hale's eyes locked onto the boy's wrist. His face changed. The color drained. His hand tightened around his glass until his knuckles turned white. He didn't move. He just stared. The head butler rushed over, pulling Noah to his feet. "Get outside," he hissed. "You've done enough damage for one night." Noah was sent to stand on the back terrace as punishment. It was cold. The wind bit through his thin shirt. He stood there alone, shivering, arms wrapped around himself. Emma saw him through the window. Her chest ached. She couldn't just leave him there. She grabbed her mother's shawl and slipped outside. The terrace was dark and quiet. Noah stood near the railing, his small frame trembling. "Here," Emma said softly, draping the shawl over his shoulders. Noah looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I ruined everything." "No," Emma said, kneeling in front of him. "You didn't ruin anything. It was an accident. They're going to send me away." "I won't let them." Before she could say more, the terrace door swung open. The head housekeeper stormed out, her face twisted with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped at Emma. "You're a servant's daughter, not his guardian. Get back inside, now." Emma stood, placing herself between the woman and Noah. "He's cold. He's scared. I'm not leaving him. You'll do as you're told, or you and your mother will be out on the street by morning." Emma's hands clenched into fists. Her voice trembled, but she didn't move. "Then we'll leave. But I'm not abandoning him." The housekeeper's eyes flashed. She raised her hand as if to strike. But then a voice came from the doorway. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Mr. Hale stood there, his face unreadable. The housekeeper stepped back immediately, smoothing her uniform. "Sir, I was just—" "Leave us," he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared inside. Mr. Hale's eyes moved to Emma, then to Noah. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned and walked back into the house without another word. Emma exhaled, her entire body shaking. She pulled Noah close, wrapping her arms around him. From the second floor behind the curtains of his office, Mr. Hale stood watching them. His hands trembled. He walked to his desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a single photograph, faded and creased from years of handling. A little boy, 3 years old, smiling at the camera. On his wrist, barely visible in the picture, was a small scar. Mr. Hale sank into his chair. His breathing was shallow, his vision blurred. He had tried to forget, tried to bury the grief so deep it couldn't reach him anymore. But tonight, seeing that scar, seeing the boy's face, it all came rushing back. The next morning, the mansion was quiet. The guests were gone. The flowers were wilting. Emma helped her mother clean up in silence. Martha noticed her daughter's red eyes. "You can't keep doing this," she said gently. "You can't protect him from everything." "Why not?" Emma whispered. "Someone has to." Martha set down the dish she was holding and pulled Emma into a hug. "Because you're just a child too." But Emma didn't feel like a child. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Mr. Hale sent word. He wanted to see Noah in his office, alone. Noah's face went white. Emma gripped his hand. "I'll come with you," she said. "Sir requested only the boy," the assistant said. Emma shook her head. "Then tell him I'm coming anyway." The assistant hesitated, then nodded. They walked through the long hallway together, their footsteps echoing. When they reached the office door, Emma squeezed Noah's hand one more time. Inside, Mr. Hale sat behind his desk. The light from the window fell across his face, making him look older than he was. He looked up as they entered. His gaze settled on Noah. His voice, when he finally spoke, was soft, almost fragile. "Where were you," he asked slowly, "before you came here?" Noah swallowed hard. "At St. Mary's Orphanage, sir." Mr. Hale's jaw tightened. His hand gripped the edge of the desk. Emma felt the air in the room shift. Something unspoken passed between them. Something heavy. Something that made her heart pound in her chest. And she realized in that moment that this conversation was about to change everything. Mr. Hale's hand shook as he reached for the phone on his desk. His voice was barely steady. "Bring me Noah's file, now." Within minutes, his assistant appeared with a manila folder. Mr. Hale opened it slowly, as if afraid of what he might find inside. Emma stood beside Noah, her hand still holding his. She watched Mr. Hale's face as he read. She watched his eyes move across the page line by line. She watched the moment his breath stopped. The file was simple. Basic information. Name. Age. Medical history. And at the top of the first page in black ink, a single sentence that made the world tilt. Found outside the emergency entrance of Hale Memorial Hospital. April 2015. Approximately 3 years old. No identification, no family located. Mr. Hale's fingers pressed into the paper, crumpling the edges. His lips moved, but no sound came out. April 2015. The same month his son disappeared. The same month his entire life collapsed. He looked up at Noah. His eyes were wet. "The scar on your wrist," he said, his voice breaking. "How did you get it?" Noah hesitated. His small hand moved to cover the mark instinctively. "I don't know, sir. I've always had it." Mr. Hale stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He crossed the room and knelt in front of the boy. Eye to eye. His hands hovered near Noah's shoulders, trembling as if afraid to touch him. "Do you remember anything?" he whispered. "Anything at all from before the orphanage?" Noah's brow furrowed. He looked down, trying to reach into the fog of his earliest memories. I remember a car, and rain, and someone holding me. But then it's just dark. Mr. Hale's face crumpled. A sound escaped him, something between a gasp and a sob. Emma's heart pounded. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt it. The weight of it. The enormity. And then, without thinking, the words spilled out of her. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling. "This boy lived with me in the orphanage." Mr. Hale turned to her, his eyes wide, desperate. Emma continued, the memories flooding back. "I was 9 when he arrived. He was so small. He didn't talk for weeks. He had nightmares every night. He used to wake up screaming, calling for someone, but he didn't know who. I stayed with him. I held his hand until he fell back asleep." Her voice cracked. "He had that scar. I remember because I asked him about it once. He said he didn't know. He said it hurt sometimes, like it was trying to remind him of something he couldn't remember." Mr. Hale pressed his hand over his mouth. Tears streamed down his face. Emma kept going. "He was sick once. Really sick. A fever that wouldn't break. The nurses didn't think he'd make it through the night. But I stayed with him. I talked to him. I told him stories. I told him he had to keep fighting because someone somewhere was waiting for him." She looked down at Noah, her own eyes filling with tears. "And he did. He survived." Mr. Hale's shoulders shook. He reached out and pulled Noah into his arms, holding him so tightly the boy gasped. "I looked for you," Mr. Hale whispered into Noah's hair. "I looked everywhere. For 8 years. I never stopped. I thought you were gone. I thought I'd lost you forever." Noah's small hands gripped Mr. Hale's shirt. Confusion flickered across his face. "Sir, I don't understand." "Noah," Mr. Hale said, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. "My son's name was Noah. He was 3 years old when he disappeared. He had a scar on his wrist from a fall when he was 2. He was in the car with my wife the night of the accident. They found her. But they never found him." The room fell silent. The truth hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. Noah's eyes widened. His lips parted. You're saying you're my son." The words shattered the silence. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. She stepped back, her legs weak. Noah shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "But I don't remember. I don't remember you." "It's okay," Mr. Hale whispered, his voice breaking. "It's okay. You were so young. The trauma, the fear, it took your memories. But you're here now. You're alive. That's all that matters." The door burst open. Martha rushed in, her face stricken. She had been listening from the hallway. "Oh my God," she breathed. Mr. Hale looked at Emma, his face raw with emotion. "You," he said, his voice thick. "You saved him. When the whole world had given up, when I had lost all hope, you were there. You kept my son alive." Emma couldn't speak. Tears poured down her cheeks. She felt Noah's hand reach for hers, and she held it tight. Mr. Hale stood still, holding Noah close. He looked at Martha, at Emma, and his voice was barely a whisper. "I owe you everything. You gave me back my son. You gave me back my life." Noah buried his face in Mr. Hale's chest and sobbed. Not from sadness, but from something deeper. Something he had been missing his entire life without knowing what it was. A father's arms, a place to belong, a name that was truly his. And in that moment, the pieces of a broken family began slowly to come back together. The news spread like wildfire. By morning, every major outlet had picked up the story. Headlines blazed across screens and newspapers nationwide. Billionaire CEO reunited with missing son after 8 years. Miracle at the Hale mansion, lost child found. Maid's daughter reveals truth that changed everything. The phones at the mansion rang non-stop. Reporters lined up outside the gates, cameras ready, microphones extended. The world wanted answers. They wanted the story. They wanted to see the man who had everything, lost everything, and found it again. 3 days later, Mr. Hale held a press conference. The room was packed. Journalists filled every seat. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. The air buzzed with anticipation. Mr. Hale stood at the podium, Noah beside him, their hands clasped together. He looked different, softer. The hard edges that had defined him for years were gone. In their place was something raw, something real. He cleared his throat. The room fell silent. 8 years ago, he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. I lost everything that mattered. My wife died in a car accident. My son disappeared that same night. The authorities searched. I searched. But there was nothing. No trace. No hope. He paused, his hand tightening around Noah's. I built an empire trying to fill that emptiness. I funded charities, supported hundreds of children, thinking maybe somehow I could make up for the one child I couldn't save. His voice broke. He took a breath. But I was wrong. Because my son wasn't lost. He was out there. Alone. Afraid. Living in an orphanage under a system that had no idea who he really was. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters leaned forward. Mr. Hale looked down at Noah, then back at the crowd. If it weren't for a 14-year-old girl named Emma Turner, I would never have known. I would have lived the rest of my life in that emptiness. But she had the courage to speak up. She recognized my son. She told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. He gestured toward the side of the room. Emma is here today, and I want the world to know she is the reason my son is standing beside me. She cared for him when no one else did. She kept him alive. She gave me back my family. The cameras turned. Emma stood near the back, half hidden behind a curtain. Her face went pale. The flashes were blinding. Microphones swung toward her. Voices shouted questions. Emma, how does it feel? Did you know who he was? What made you speak up? She stumbled backward, overwhelmed. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. This wasn't her moment. This wasn't her story. She was just a girl who did what anyone should have done. She turned and slipped through a side door into the hallway behind the stage. Her back hit the wall. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Tears poured down her face. She heard the door open. Footsteps. Small. Quick. Emma. It was Noah. He ran to her and dropped to his knees, throwing his arms around her neck. Please don't leave, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please, I'm scared. I don't know how to do this without you. Emma held him tight, her tears soaking into his shirt. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. I promise. The door opened again. This time it was Mr. Hale. He stepped inside, his eyes red. He saw them on the floor holding each other, and something in his expression shifted. He walked over slowly and knelt beside them. Emma, he said softly. I meant every word I said in there. You're not just someone who helped us. You're family. Emma shook her head, tears streaming. I'm just the maid's daughter. No, Mr. Hale said firmly. You're the girl who saved my son. You're the one who had more courage than anyone in that room. And from this moment forward, no one in this house, no one in this world is allowed to call you or your mother servants. Emma looked up at him, disbelief written across her face. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You gave me back everything I thought I'd lost. The least I can do is make sure you and your mother are taken care of. Truly taken care of. The door opened once more. Martha appeared, her face streaked with tears. She saw her daughter on the floor, saw Mr. Hale kneeling beside her, and she covered her mouth with both hands. Mr. Hale stood and turned to face the staff who had gathered in the hallway. His voice rang out clear and unshakable. From this day forward, Martha and Emma Turner are part of this family. They are not employees. They are not staff. They are family, and anyone who treats them as anything less will answer to me. The hallway was silent. Then slowly, one by one, the staff bowed their heads in respect. Martha broke down, sobbing into her hands. Emma stood and ran to her mother, and they held each other as if the weight of a lifetime had finally been lifted. Mr. Hale placed one hand on Noah's shoulder and the other on Emma's. The four of them stood together in the golden light streaming through the tall windows. A family. Broken. Lost. and now impossibly found. Outside, the cameras kept flashing. The reporters kept shouting. But inside, in that quiet hallway, the only sound was the soft, grateful breathing of people who had finally come home. 1 month later, the mansion felt different. Warmer. Softer. Like a house that had finally remembered how to breathe. The mornings no longer began in silence. Now there was the sound of laughter echoing down the hallways, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation over breakfast. Mr. Hale had changed his entire routine. He no longer buried himself in work from dawn to dusk. Instead, he drove Noah to school every morning. He asked about homework. He attended soccer games. He learned how to braid hair when Noah's got too long. And he made sure Emma was part of everything. She no longer lived in the back room. Mr. Hale had given her and Martha their own wing of the house with windows that faced the garden and walls painted in soft, welcoming colors. Emma had her own desk, her own books, her own space to dream. One evening the four of them sat down for dinner together. Not in the grand dining hall, but in the smaller breakfast room where the light was golden and the table felt intimate. Noah told a joke he'd heard at school. It wasn't even that funny, but they all laughed until their sides hurt. Martha wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Hale smiled genuinely for what felt like the first time in years. After dinner, Emma helped Noah with his math homework while Mr. Hale and Martha cleaned up together. It was simple, ordinary, and it was perfect. A week later, a letter arrived. Emma opened it with shaking hands. Her mother stood beside her, breathless. It was a full scholarship. To one of the best private schools in the state. All expenses covered. A future she had never dared to imagine was suddenly real. She looked up at Mr. Hale, who stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a small smile on his face. "You earned this," he said simply. "Now go make the most of it." Emma threw her arms around him. He held her tight like she was his own. But the transformation didn't stop there. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Mr. Hale asked Emma a question that would change everything. "What do you want for your future, Emma? Really want?" She hesitated. Then quietly she said, "I want to open a home. For kids like Noah. Like me. A place where they're not just taken care of. A place where they're seen. Where they matter." Mr. Hale was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Then let's do it. Together." Over the next 6 months they worked side by side. Architects were hired. Plans were drawn. A piece of land was purchased on the edge of the city, surrounded by trees and open sky. Emma was involved in every decision. The colors of the walls, the layout of the bedrooms, the library filled with books, the garden where kids could play. She wanted it to feel like home. Not an institution. A home. And when it came time to choose a name, Mr. Hale didn't hesitate. "It should have both our names," he said. "Because this isn't just my dream. It's yours. It's ours." The day of the opening ceremony was bright and clear. A crowd gathered. Former residents of St. Mary's, donors, community members, and dozens of children, hopeful and wide-eyed. A banner stretched across the entrance, bold letters against white fabric, "Hale Turner Home for Children." Emma stood at the front, holding the ribbon. Noah stood beside her. Mr. Hale on the other side. Martha just behind them, her hand on her daughter's shoulder. The photographer called for them to smile. But Emma was already crying. As the ribbon fell and the doors opened, children poured inside, their laughter filling every corner. Emma watched them run through the halls, touching the walls, claiming their spaces, and she felt something she had never fully felt before. Peace. Martha leaned close and whispered, "The world finally gave us back what it owed." Emma turned to her mother, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. Mr. Hale placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me a reason to build something that matters." She looked up at him. "Thank you for letting me help." They stood together in the doorway as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A family, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the quiet, powerful act of showing up for one another when it mattered most. And in that moment, everything felt whole. Sometimes a miracle begins with a single word. Emma only spoke the truth. But that truth gave a broken man the courage to love again. There are losses that can only be healed by kindness. And there are families that are built not by blood, but by the hands that reach out when everyone else has turned away. Kindness never loses its way. It just takes time to find home again. Thank you for listening and giving your precious time to this story. I'm curious, where are you right now, and what time is it where you are? Leave a comment below and subscribe to Maid's Daughter Stories, where small acts light up big worlds.